Gardening can be hard enough without having to sift through the information overload.
Usually, there's more than one way to accomplish a goal when growing plants. Unfortunately, however, this only seems to add to the confusion. Even worse are the certain types of tricks, tips, and shortcuts that seem to permeate into the space that are just downright wrong.
The amount and variety of gardening myths out there in the ether rivals or even seems to surpass the gardening truths. False claims said with such conviction, often accompanied by misplaced results, can make any gardener's head spin, especially new ones.
Today, I've got 8 especially egregious gardening myths to expose. Not necessarily the flashiest or most popular ones, but 8 gardening lies that once we acknowledge and move on from, we'll become significantly better gardeners.
I don't think that gardening myths necessarily arise from malicious intent. Probably it's just a case of someone trying something, seeing a result, and then that becoming a truth without another thought. Add in a few more people experiencing the same result and outcome, and true or not, you've got yourself a myth.
Easily, the first myth to bust about gardening is that it's hard. And it kind of is until it isn't.
The same way that swimming or riding a bike is hard until it isn't? Well, that's gardening.
Jumping in without experience or a knowledge base will always produce dodgy results at first.
Which makes sense, as even veteran, experienced growers get dead crops every year. Once the successes pile on, it snowballs from there, and you get extremely good at a handful of crops. Everyone that sticks with it does. If you're lucky, it's fruits and vegetables and herbs that you love. Otherwise, you just learn to appreciate them out of a bountiful necessity.
The main thing is, though, it's only hard because you haven't done it before. And anyone who's willing to fail while also willing to learn can be extremely successful with gardening.
The only issue is, even if you are successful, many people think that gardening is super expensive.
And that is myth number 2. Truth be told, anything can be expensive if you let it be, and gardening is no exception.
Fancy hardware, overpriced raised beds, expensive soils, expensive fertilizers. Of course, gardening can pile on the costs. And when you couple that with dodgy results early on, well, that's where you get your $50 heads of lettuce and your $100 tomatoes. Nearly everything to do with gardening can be sourced for free. Don't have money for fancy raised beds? Well, you can make them out of pallets. Trowels, scoopers, and diggers out of your price range? Well, just use a cottage cheese container for now. Even pots and containers that are basically new are just discarded at nurseries and the big box stores. Gardening only costs a fortune if you let it.
Tools and hardware are one thing and can definitely increase your costs, especially in the beginning. But one of the most expensive things in gardening has got to be starter plants.
These are the seedlings, plugs, and starter plants that growers buy to avoid direct seeding and to get a head start on their garden. They are basically an instant garden when planted, but they're not cheap, especially at the beginning of every planting window when they're the most useful. Making your own starter plants is not hard and can mitigate some of these costs. It's like we said, everything can be expensive, but only if you make it so.
Another myth that I find people have trouble wrapping their head around is space. Specifically, that you need a lot of it to be a gardener or to grow food successfully. And it's simply not the case.
Potted and small space growing is an industry unto itself. Container garlic, onions, carrots, and even blueberries can produce harvests that are out of this world. More space can introduce more problems. If your space to grow is small, fear not. Your yields can still be large.
Getting into the plants themselves, another really common myth that's perpetuated out there is that plants need to be watered every day. And this is generally untrue. Plants need to be watered when they need to be watered.
That could be once a week, once a month, once a day, or even twice a day. Moisture needs are dictated by a variety of things, such as soil, climate, time of year, prevailing weather, and of course, what you're actually growing. Drainage is absolutely key, so never have your plants standing in water just so that you can avoid a watering. Use and incorporate high levels of organic matter into your soil and cover it with layers of mulch to retain that moisture and keep the hydration constant. Plants need water when they need it, and there's no way around this. But it's generally better to water your crops less often, but more thoroughly. Organic matter and diligent mulching helps you accomplish this.
For plants to grow properly, they really only need access to four things: air, water, light, and food. Three of those four things are generally free, and the fourth, food or fertilizers, well, that tends to give people pause. This is where you can definitely spend a lot of money on gardening. But honestly, you don't have to.
Take care of your soils, don't overwater, mulch heavily, and incorporate compost back into your profile to keep the nutrients flowing and cycling as they should. Chemical applications of nutrients only creates this cyclic need for more and more synthetic fertilizing. Stay natural and slow release, and you'll find that buying fertilizers from the store is completely unnecessary. And if you do need a boost, a free liquid fertilizer that's as good as any you can buy can be made from just weeds. Ferment a variety of weeds for 8 to 10 weeks, and you'll have the best fertilizer that money can't buy.
And while we're on that subject, we have to touch on all those homemade miracle cure items that people talk about all the time, especially on this platform.
Banana peels, Epsom salts, eggshells, fish heads, the list goes on and on. No doubt all organic things are gonna break down eventually and create nutrients. But none of these items are gonna generate miracles or even positive results immediately. Increased microbial activity, added organic content, and of course a few nutrients are certainly not gonna hurt your plants. But any of the benefits are gonna be for your soil. And even then, it's likely long term, and you're not going to see any change in the outcome of your current crops.
One substance that really gets special attention is used coffee grounds. The claim is that it acidifies alkaline soils and that it can even repel pests.
Not true. Decomposed coffee grounds are basically neutral, and pests have no problem attacking plants no matter how much of it you spread around. Again, while not necessarily bad for our plants, it's not something that's going to create miracles.
And finally, one of the more humorous myths out there goes back to that water and the claim that water droplets left on your leaves is going to cause the midday sun to create and burn holes in them.
Obviously, it's not true. It just doesn't happen. I've taken the broadest leaves in my garden on the hottest days and tried this over and over. Watering the foliage from above and watering your crops midday is not ideal, but not for these reasons. Chalk this up to another myth.
When I first went to compile this list, I found that the amount of gardening myths and misconceptions was staggering. Even still, the 8 that we covered here today was a lot. So let's go ahead and recount them all so that they all stick.
Gardening is confusing enough without having to deal with all of these folk tales, fallacies, and outright lies.
Hopefully, today we've covered some of the more egregious gardening myths that are standing in the way to your best gardening years ahead. As always, guys, happy growing, and I'll see you in the next one.